Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Signs of the Swarm, Amongst the Low and Empty, out July 28th on Century Media Records. This album has 11 tracks, 42 minutes in length, and this is the band's fifth full-length studio album. They are an American deathcore band. The best compliment I can give the design of this record is that it's not repetitive, it's not boring, it's not predictable. But it is very constant and balanced. There is a spinal cord, or there is a red line that connects every single song on this album, but still allows them to go far beyond the walls, the parameters that perhaps this genre defines for itself. And that's where the playability, that's where the fluidity, and that's where the real impact comes when you look down at the experience of going from first to last. This is one of those records that every time you play, you're going to discover something new that just perhaps wasn't there before. Or it was there, it's just that it's not necessarily noticeable at first time around. It's one of those albums that has great shelf life, great playability, and really offers an interesting journey for the listener if you decide to engage with it as an album and not just as individual songs. As far as the sound is concerned, this record is more than deathcore, and I think that's where that diversity comes and that's where that playability comes into the forefront. Deathcore is the genre, deathcore is the spinal cord, deathcore is perhaps the red line that connects every single song. But they were not afraid of using that genre as a bungee cord. Think about that and think about that sort of metaphor. They have a starting point. That genre is their starting point as far as sound is concerned. But they're willing to stretch it to the limit and really go outside of the parameters of the genre itself, bringing in other influences from other genres in order to make their sound a little bit more eclectic, a little bit more textured, a little bit more layered, perhaps even a little bit richer. But then that chord, once it reaches that maximum, it tends to bring you back to that same starting point. And that's exactly the beauty of this record. It goes outside the box, it stretches itself out, but when it reaches the limit, it feels like it brings you back into that same starting point of the genre of deathcore as the sound that really catapults the experience on each and every single song. That is the sound experience in the nutshell. And I love a record like this because it feels different. It feels like you're listening to a deathcore album, but at the same time it doesn't feel like you're listening to a deathcore album. It has that sort of aroma, it has that sort of vibe, that sort of atmosphere to it. It's a really engaging record from that point of view because it makes you pause within songs. It makes you pause from song to song to really ponder and wonder exactly what am I listening to? What is this band trying to do? And once you get that sort of engagement with the listener, you have the listener hooked. And this album has the ability to do that sound-wise. Has great production that allows you to feel the heavier side of the band on this album, the brutal side of the band on this album, but it also allows you to feel other emerging elements that the band has within their sound, either be metalcore elements, djent elements, technical elements, even atmospheric elements and melancholic as well. This album has a lot to give sound-wise, which makes the songs feel somewhat similar because of that same starting point, but at the same time miles apart from one another. It's a really interesting and engaging experience when you go from song to song and you see yourself navigating through this roller coaster ride of an album. 11 songs with a lot of different experiences, but great sound quality across all of them. And there is some consistency in that sound. What the guitars, drums, bass, vocals are doing might change slightly from song to song. The nuances change from song to song, and pushing those limits definitely gives you a different experience. But the quality and the overall output in terms of how it comes across, there is also some consistency in that, and that is really important. Perhaps the biggest consistency is coming from the drums sound-wise and then from the vocals. As far as the drums are concerned, I felt like they wore a little bit of that elastic that allowed everything else to go a little bit further, but then when it was time to rein everything back in and bring it back to that starting point, the drums really did that because they offer more of a sense of consistency, song in and song out, than any other element. Always very heavy, always very brutal, creating a sense of thickness, creating a sense of foundation, which then allow, for example, the guitars to be one of the key elements in the diversity and explosiveness that this album offers sound-wise. When you look at influences from genres like metalcore, gent, technical death metal, I think you're gonna find them more often than not in the guitar sound and the experience that those guitars give. Obviously, the drums have some elements of those genres, specifically more death metal. There's some elements in there as well, but the guitars have more of a defining role in order to make the listener realize that this song is going in a different path, or is reaching a different outcome, or it has a different perimeter, if you will. So the guitars are really important from that standpoint. They have great life, great energy, great sound. The production behind them is outstanding as well, because it allows you to feel like they're working in multiple lanes, sometimes at the same time, sometimes in parallel, bringing them together. The guitars have incredible life, incredible energy throughout this entire record, allowing the drums, and the drums allowing the guitars to have that energy because they're a little bit further back, they're a little bit more consistent, they're a little bit more grounded, more concentrated on the heavier side of the sound, on the heavier side of the tracks, creating that important backdrop that allows everything else to have a little bit more mobility. Vocally, the album is also very consistent. I mean, there are some moments that breaks through that mold, that has a different perspective. Matt Heafy is featured on one of the tracks, so his vocals are going to bring a different dynamic to the song. So there is some texture to the overall vocal performance. But when you look just at the heavier side of the album, when you look at the brutality that this record has, it's undeniable the consistency that the vocals offer from that standpoint. One of the moments of this album where you feel like this record definitely is a heavier album, and it's heavier in a consistent way, is when you start to look at the vocal performance, song in and song out, and not seeing a lot of deviations, not seeing a lot of add-ons, or trying to do too much from that standpoint, because the album is already doing so much musically. You want to offer some sense of consistency. You want to create some bookends. And this album has the bookends of the drums on one side, the vocals on the other, and then the diversity, chaos, eclecticness of the guitars standing right in the middle. So it's a very interesting album from that perspective. It feels a lot richer, a lot more textured, a lot more layered than perhaps at first glance, because of the brutality of the record, the heaviness of the album. When you listen to this record, you're gonna feel like, wow, this album is heavy, this album is... That's always going to be the talking point. That's always going to be the first thing that you're going to hold on to, because it's visible, it's memorable, it's in front of you. But once you start listening, really listening to this album, and going deeper into the songs and start to peel some of the layers that they have, you start to realize that there is a lot more to it than just heavy for the sake of being heavy. This album definitely has great qualities to them, and it starts to set themselves apart with an album like this from other bands that have more of a prototypical approach. This album is different without copying what other people are doing to make themselves be different within the umbrella of this genre, of course. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Pray for Death. The drums and guitars are like machine guns. I mean, this is like insane. The heaviness, the power, the momentum that they offer, just pure brutality, pure aggression. It feels like that is the way it starts in order to get your attention, and then we can start working out on the finer details. Some of the finer details of this song is some of the, I would go as far as to say, some industrial, atmospheric, electronic elements that exist within this track, some samples, if you will. These elements are important in order to create some texture to the song, in order to make the overall track feel a little bit more complete, a little bit richer, offering more than just your prototypical heaviness and creating heaviness to push the track forward. But still a very heavy track. Now, it allows some breaks. It's a song that doesn't stay heavy consistently from start to finish. It allows some ebbs and flows. This song definitely has a lot of movement. And when those breaks happen, the track becomes a little bit more technical. It becomes a little bit more driven. It takes you in a completely different arena. Now it's not about the brutality, it's not about the heaviness. It's more about the emotion. It's more about the technical side of their sound. Still keeping the vocals consistently heavy so that there's still brutality there, there's still heaviness there. But sound-wise, this song moves in a lot of different directions while staying perhaps a little bit more static on the vocal front. Next we have Dreamkiller. I love the underlining melody and some of the atmospheric nuances that this track offers, because it is a track that has a very distinct DNA sound-wise from any other song on this record. The drums build the path, a heavy path, but then that allows the guitars to be a little bit more free and work in conjunction with the drums, and at the exact same time work in parallel with the drums to create that sense of freedom, to bring that technicality, to bring that djenty atmosphere to the guitar sound, so that you have the ability to be technical on one end but still be very brutal on the other. Finding a way to coexist with these two, it's really the lifeline, if you will, of this entire song. Now, the last third of the track is a complete 180, because this song feels very consistent. It feels to some degree linear in how it's moving, and almost makes you feel like you can expect the end result, you can expect the outcome. But the last third of the track is completely different. It becomes a more melodic, melancholic, the mood changes, the atmosphere that was simmering at the beginning comes into the forefront, becomes noticeable, becomes perhaps the driving force of the track itself. And musically and vocally, you start to go on a very different path, and you start to feel like this song is going towards a very different journey, or at least the end result as far as that original journey was concerned. This allows the track to finish on a very different note, and this is important. This is important in the overall construction of this record. Having songs that finish on a different note, on a different vibe than how the song started, it's important for the track itself. But when you look at the overall design of the record, you're almost building an interlude into a track that allows the communication between songs and the overall design of the album to be a lot more fluid. It gives you breaks within tracks without having to create interludes to cause those breaks. This makes the album more manageable, more digestible from a listener standpoint, and this track is a perfect example on how it ends in order to create that in the context of a record. Last but not least, the Witch Beckons. This song features Matt Heafy from Trivium. It's heavy, it has killer drums, killer guitars, really thick guitar sound, and that is a little bit of the driving force. It's overall a very condensed sounding track, but it changes, and it changes from a vocal standpoint. Having Matt Heafy on the track breaks that monotony. It doesn't mean that he comes in and he's going to be over the top, but he comes in and he gives the track something different, something unique, and unique enough in order for you to feel like there are some breaks within the track, there are some pauses. It takes away from the linearity that overall the song has, and the overall linearity and flow that comes with it, by creating a little bit of an ebb and flow, by creating a pocket within the song that allows you to go in a different journey, to feel different towards the track, and then re-engage with the brutality of the song, both musically and vocally, allowing the track to finish even stronger, or at least it finishes even stronger than how it started. But a very interesting track, and they used Matt Heafy perfectly on this song, because he was used as a tool to create a different dynamic and to really break the mold of how this track seemed to be from the start. And then when you look at the end, you almost forget that the song had that ebb and flow right in the middle of it. Really interesting song, one that definitely stands out, not just because Matt is in it, but because of the impact that it has to the overall design and the overall flow of the song. This is it, Signs of the Swarm, Amongst the Low and Empty, on July 28th on Century Media. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.